right, welcome into Surviving Paradise, the podcast that takes a sometimes serious, oftentimes humorous look at the claim by Jehovah's Witness leadership that they are living in a modern-day spiritual paradise. I'm your host here, Stacy Bauman, former elder, servant, and a kid raised as a Jehovah's Witness in the 70s and 80s. As we do, just a trigger warning, there's sarcasm, humor, sometimes serious content, never meant to offend. Appreciate you being here. I'm going to tackle what I think is a very serious subject this week. And with that said, I'm going to try to keep the snark to a minimum because I take this particular subject very seriously. When I was a Jehovah's Witness, there were certain subjects or life events that I felt they really had no business commenting on, much less offering counsel to someone in the middle of a life-altering challenge. And this is one of those things, those subjects. I remember as an elder feeling very, and I do mean very unqualified to be offering anything but love, maybe a hug, and maybe some really common sense advice that wasn't endorsed by the governing body when it came to someone dealing with this. I felt like they should sit this one out. And that subject is mental illness. Mental illness is serious. And I want to say at the outset, please take it very seriously. Seek professional help, so on and so forth. I'm going to overemphasize it and repeat myself a lot because I feel like it's that important. And I want to give it the weight it deserves. And that includes all things Jehovah's Witnesses. What falls under the subject of mental illness, you might ask? How do we define something that is, frankly, very, very complex? Well, consider this from the Mayo Clinic, where it says, quote, mental illness, also called mental health disorders, refers to a wide range of mental health conditions, disorders that affect your mood, thinking, and behavior. Examples of mental illness include depression, anxiety disorders, schizophrenia, eating disorders, and addictive behaviors. End quote. Serious stuff. In my personal opinion, anytime you get into the fabric of any unique human being, you're trying to define something so complex, you can only land on this type of blanket definition. Whether it's genetics to life experience, the list of things that affect our mental health is unbelievable. It's countless. So again, overemphasis, repetition for emphasis. I got good in the theocratic school on that. Mental health is very serious stuff, and I take it seriously. And far too many wonderful people suffer from poor to serious mental illnesses, and that includes inside Jehovah's Witnesses. From the National Institute of Mental Health, we're told, quote, mental illnesses are common in the United States and around the world. It's estimated that more than 1 in 5 U.S. adults live with a mental illness, which equates to 59.3 million in 2022, which is 23.1% of the U.S. adult population. Mental illnesses include many different conditions that vary in degree of severity, ranging from mild to moderate to severe. End quote. As the point continues from the National Alliance on Mental Illness, we're told 22.8% of U.S. adults experienced mental illness in 2021, which is 57.8 million people. This represents 1 in 5 adults. 5.5% of U.S. adults experienced serious mental illness in 2021. That's 14 million people. This represents 1 in 20 adults. 16.5% of U.S. youth aged 6 through 17, precious little baby teenage years, experienced a mental health disorder in 2016. That's 7.7 million young people. 7.6% of U.S. adults experienced a co-occurring substance use disorder and mental illness in 2021. That's over 19 million people. And if you want to take the seriousness and the weight of this worldwide, the World Health Organization said this: In 2019, 970 million people globally were living with a mental health disorder, with anxiety and depression the most common. Mental health conditions can cause difficulties in all aspects of life, including relationships with family, friends, and community. They can result from or lead to problems at school and at work. Globally, mental disorders account for 1 in 6 years lived with disability. People with severe mental health conditions die 10 to 20 years earlier than the general population, and having a mental health condition increases the risk of suicide and experiencing human rights violations. End of their quote from the World Health Organization. Needless to say, it is all very heavy. A worldwide health crisis, and it is never to be taken lightly down to each one of us. It goes without saying that even those with years and years of training struggle to find the best solutions for those that suffer from any sort of mental stress or illness. It's incredibly complex. Even experts see it as one of the world's biggest problems. According to the Lancet and Global Health, they said, quote, in total, poor mental health was estimated to cost the world economy approximately $2.5 trillion per year in poor health and reduced productivity in 2010, a cost projected to rise to $6 trillion by 2030, end quote. Take a deep breath. Did I mention how heavy this is? With that small snapshot of statistics on mental health, it should shock no one associated with Jehovah's Witnesses that they have a long history, what I consider a sordid, dangerous, and disheartening history, commenting on mental illness. In fact, this week, the only website powered by Holy Spirit has a feature article on the front page titled, How to Help Those with Mental Health Challenges. The Bible Offers Practical Advice. There it is. It's inspired me to comment on the faithful and discreet slaves, the governing body's many moments of counsel to those who have struggled with or are struggling with their mental health. I'm not going to run through the article I just mentioned. It's on the front page of the website. And frankly, the Watchtower Library is filled, and I do mean filled, with similar articles. I'm going to look how an organization that claims to be led by Jesus Christ of the Bible has taken his word, added their own words, and irresponsibly offered counsel to those suffering from a very serious form of mental illness. Please, if you're listening and you are someone who suffers from any kind of mental stress, disorder, anxiety, you name it, please take what you hear seriously and always seek professional help, someone that's been trained to help. First and foremost, out of the chutes, this crazy podcast host is just like you. I have suffered with depression in the past and still work out weekly, constantly to stave off anxiety, and have been open on this show about my own battles with obsessive compulsive disorder, a diagnosis I got years ago, and something that you wonderful people probably see painfully bleed through on this show, as seen in my repetitive nature. I get the notes. Again, my apologies. I appreciate you being here. So please note, I share this because I understand. Huge hugs to everybody. And as someone that has dealt with some of this stuff personally from a young age, I can tell you it is very difficult. Once more, I can't emphasize it enough. Seek help for anyone that's dealing with this. I promise it is a better course of action. It's an illness, nothing more. Going from a kid raised as a Jehovah's Witness with all the stress that comes with it to being appointed an elder in my mid-20s, I've watched the governing body's comments on this challenge many, many times over the years. And I'll say it again. They should sit this one out. Furthermore, while the Bible has some nice principles for life, I've never denied that on this crazy show. There's some wonderful things. It's a book of value. There's good things in there, lots of bad things. Things like not killing people or stick to one mate, don't lie, be kind to your neighbors, all good principles. But to insinuate that the Bible is a good place to find relief from mental illness is grossly irresponsible. But I'll get there. Mental illness is rampant among Jehovah's Witnesses. I've shared some of this in past episodes, but when I was younger, I found myself deeply perplexed with how common mental illness was inside Jehovah's Witnesses. Aren't they supposed to be the happiest people on earth? From the Kingdom Ministry of February 2002, page 1, we are told, quote, "Happy is the people whose God is Jehovah." Those words describe Jehovah's Witnesses as the happiest people on earth, end quote. It's not Disneyland. It's not the happiest place on earth. It's your local Kingdom Hall filled with Jehovah's Witnesses. It's a bold claim. And you'll note that despite that quote still in the library, there's no study cited to support the claim. Not sure if they just hooked up a cross-section of Jehovah's Witnesses to some machine or did some blind studies and it came back with the results, happiest people on earth, or what. But the claims in their literature is endless. Don't we have angels watching over us? Aren't the hairs on my head numbered? Despite these bold claims, independent doctors, psychologists, psychiatrists, and others have studied the emotional state of Jehovah's Witnesses. And here is a quick snapshot, a sampling of some of those studies and what they found. From McDonald and Luckett, Religious Affiliation and Psychiatric Diagnosis, Journal for the Scientific Study of Religion, it produced a study that looked at the relationship between religious groups and psychiatric diagnoses. They found, quote, Jehovah's Witnesses were included within sects along with other groups as Christian Science, Mormons, and Seventh-day Adventists. Sects had a higher level of psychosis, 21% compared to the sample average of 10%, end quote, higher mental illness. How about another? The Mental Health of Jehovah's Witnesses by John Spencer. It's a widely quoted study. The study found that in the three-year period from 1971 to and including 1973, he had 7,546 inpatients admitted to the West Australian Mental Health Services psychiatric hospitals, of which 50 of those people were active witnesses. Particularly high was the rate of schizophrenics amongst witnesses, end quote. But going back even further in God's organization, there was the very first American study in 1949 by Dr. M.J. Pescore, diagnosed as psychotic over 7% of his total sample of 177 young males imprisoned due to obeying the Watchtower's prohibition against complying with military regulations. The level of witness psychosis in his sample was about 17 times higher than that for the population as a whole. End quote. I could keep going. I'm not going to do it because if this isn't a depressing subject as it is, it can punch you into depression, and I don't want to do that. There are several other references and studies to consider, but religion and mental illness is still an emerging field in so many ways. All of this is to say that mental health has always been a crisis inside the happiest people on earth, Jehovah's Witnesses. The witness population only continued to grow until recently, making the number even greater. More people in the faith, more people facing sickness, stress, and anxiety. And as a young person and then as an elder who tried to help people suffering, I was puzzled by all of it. I wasn't able personally to just dismiss this as a malady in the last days, supporting their claims. We were supposed to be happy. And so many I was around, they just weren't. They weren't. Antidepressants were widely taken during my time as an older J-Dub in the 80s through the 2000s before I left. I felt very confident in saying that mental crisis was a part of the human condition, and Jehovah's Witnesses, by everyone I knew and every congregation I was in, weren't immune to it, even if they continually told the rest of us how happy we all were. But like most, I wondered why Jehovah would be sure to hide literature during the Holocaust, or get some dirt for a kingdom hall, or get a building permit pushed through the city council, but he wouldn't help one of his loyal people dealing with suffocating, painful mental anguish. How did he expect someone to live like this? What was he doing to help us, you and me? Enter the good old faithful and discreet slave. You see, for Jehovah's Witnesses, it was the guys in upstate New York that were going to guide us through mental maladies. And would you like a sampling of how they have handled mental health, all of the issues, all of the complexity, going back into the 20th century, but still several decades after Jesus invisibly and allegedly sat down on his throne in heaven beginning in 1914? Things were supposed to be guided by Jesus, right? First, please note that despite this always being God's organization, here and what follows is what a Jehovah's Witness is and was supposed to believe he had to say, that being Jesus, to his shepherds here on the earth. They would then relay it to us. In the beginning, doctors or professional help in this organization for someone who suffered mentally with any form of anxiety, depression, and even more serious stuff, it was a big no-no. You could not do it. In fact, see if you can pick up how they feel about it. In the Watchtower of 1952, from January 15th, page 53, Jehovah's Witnesses were told, quote, "So, we must shun the false guides of men and their false religions, babbling psychologists, wordy psychiatrists, and polluted politicians, all of which have built up such tremendous reputations as colossal failures. Look at the messes they have made. Know them by their rotten fruits. Reject them for their fruits." End quote. Babbling psychologists, wordy psychiatrists. The now governing body was telling any Jehovah's Witness who read this and might be suffering with mental problems that psychologists and psychiatrists were nothing more than a hot mess, that they babble, and oh, by the way, they were rotten. Any advice they gave was to be rejected. If that shocks you, take a look at what Jesus told them to tell the rest of us just 2 years later. Apparently, Jesus and his guys thought resorting to insults would get the message across. The following, by the way, spiritual reference cites a finger painting study with children, chimpanzees, and psychiatrists. And wouldn't you know it, the fine shepherds in upstate New York have the last word. In the Awake of October 22nd, 1954, we are told, quote, "Without doubt, psychologists do know a little about human and animal personalities, but also, without doubt, they have a lot to learn. And they think they know more than they actually do, or they would not have let 2 chimpanzees make such monkeys out of them." End quote. Now, what would a depressed or anxious Jehovah's Witness seeking help from the organization get from that wise remark? Psychologists who have dedicated their life to understanding the human brain, how it functions, they were actually as dumb as monkeys and have a lot to learn. Following in the governing body's footsteps here, you know it's coming. I can't go a week without mentioning one of my favorite people, as well as one of their favorite people, which made him mine, my guy Noah. Our guy Noah knew even less about psychology than modern-day psychologists do. I think that's a safe bet, but I'm pretty sure he would take it personal being compared to a monkey, considering he hunted them, found them, lured them onto his boat, and saved them so the faithful slave could then use them to insult psychologists and psychiatrists, right? Oh, the irony. But putting that random stupidity aside, consider being a Jehovah's Witness in this moment, reading that Awake article, looking for spiritual direction, some comfort, because you're suffering from some mental pain, only to be told doctors aren't that smart. They're a lot like monkeys. Is it fair to say that that likely had a negative effect on someone? Is that a positive message from someone in the depths of a dark place? You're a Jehovah's Witness in 1954. You've been praying to Jehovah about these awful feelings that are consuming you. You pick up this literature and boom. Don't ever go to a doctor or psychologist. They get fooled even by monkeys. Behold the faithful and discreet slave. In an organization some 3 to 4 decades removed from Jesus taking his throne, this is the message Jesus wanted out there? The article on mental health currently featured on the website is just another in a long line of articles that glaze over what is a very serious problem, making any thinking person wonder what Jesus is thinking about up there. This is what he's thinking he should say to us? I'm not here saying that nothing this organization writes about on the subject is helpful to someone hurting. Not at all. I'm not saying that. But most of what they offer is common sense, minus a few things they should be encouraging a Jehovah's Witness to do. And as an example, this week's article, again, go read it for yourself if you're interested, on the front page as of this morning. It could be summed up in a few words. If you don't want to read it, here it is. It's pretty easy. Be kind to people struggling with mental issues. That's it. That's good counsel. Be kind. You should do that with everybody. They then go on to cherry pick encouraging verses from a book that's also filled just pages away with violence, mayhem, people getting things cut off all over their bodies, people getting killed. And as they claim, the book itself has a message and it ends in future doom if you're not a Jehovah's Witness. And they say, look at that book to encourage someone who is in a very dark place. Sure, they cite reasonable verses about being kind and patient. We should be. But I observed something interesting about this week's article, at least as an example. There is not one word as of this morning about seeking the help of a doctor. Now, I know it's in their other articles. I'm not nitpicking. But anytime you mention the words mental health, that should be included. There's no mention that this could all be rooted in chemical problems, in genetics, or possibly in some emotional pain or trauma that someone's experienced. Nothing. If you look at this article, and it's like so many others these guys dispense to people who are in pain, they lift 4 Bible verses on being kind to people and a couple of small experiences that no one can corroborate from real world people, supposedly, allegedly. But there is not a single mention of getting help from a trained professional, a doctor, someone who understands. And after reading you the quotes from their past literature, is this shocking to anyone? Should it be shocking to a Jehovah's Witness? Look, I'm leading us somewhere, I promise. But the anti-professional help rhetoric didn't stop as far back as the 50s, with all Jehovah's Witnesses believing this came from heaven. This was Jesus' counsel. Don't dismiss the fact there were real people reading this in the 50s. See if you spot the warm and loving advice from this reference from the governing body and faithful slave from the Awake of 1960, March 8th, pages 27 through 28. This is in print for someone who may be suffering. Quote, as a rule, for a Christian to go to a worldly psychiatrist is an admission of defeat. It amounts to going down to Egypt for help. Isaiah 31:1. Often when a witness of Jehovah goes to a psychiatrist, the psychiatrist will try to persuade him that his troubles are caused by this religion. Sorry for the laughter, you don't say. Back to the quote, entirely overlooking the fact that the Christian witnesses of Jehovah are the best oriented, happiest, and most contented group of people on the face of the earth. They have the least need for psychiatrists. End quote for a moment. Consider that sentence again. A psychiatrist is overlooking that Jehovah's Witnesses, as the governing body claims, are the best oriented, happiest, most content people on earth. No one needs a psychiatrist less than a Jehovah's Witness. Did you know? Seriously? Is that why the Jehovah's Witness set up the appointment, drove their car to the office, and met with a psychiatrist? That's why they're commenting here. That's why this counsel is there and still available to a witness in pain accessing the Watchtower Library. It's the psychiatrist's fault that the Jehovah's Witness is sitting in their office. The psychiatrist must be ignorant about how wonderful life as a Jehovah's Witness is because, the Jehovah's Witness sitting in front of him actually made an appointment, got in their car, and showed up. We call this gaslighting in 2025. Behold the insanity, at least in the Awake of 1960, but it still lives. I'm getting there. The insanity of the faithful and discreet slave. Very discreet indeed. Psychiatrists are monkeys. Psychiatrists are stupid. We're the happiest people on earth. No one needs them less than us. Make sense? Well, it does when you consider this counsel isn't for the random psychiatrist that might pick up one of these magazines. It's for the Jehovah's Witness reading it who likely suffers from mental illness. This counsel is designed to shame the person, the witness, into never going to a mental health professional. Make no mistake, please access the Awake of 1960, March 8th. It's not for the doctor, it's for you and me. Furthermore, they expose the true motive of this counsel for depressed people. The psychiatrist might just tell you it's this religion that is making you sick. And I can confirm the psychiatrist is right. I'll be bold here, even if it makes someone uncomfortable. It definitely contributes to mental illness. Keep in mind, you're a Jehovah's Witness in pain right now. You're reading this article. You're desperately seeking an answer. You've prayed about it. You've been told from the stage, oh, the answers are in the Bible and in our literature. This is what you're reading. And so that same reference from the March 8th, 1960 Awake includes this. It continues, rather. Quote, also, more and more psychiatrists are resorting to hypnosis, which is a demonic form of worldly wisdom. What is needed at such times is not worldly psychiatrists who may wholly ignore the change that the truth and God's Holy Spirit have made in one's life and who know nothing of their power to help one put on a new Christian personality. Rather, what is needed at such times is a mature Christian in whom one has confidence and who is vitally interested in one's welfare and who will not shrink back from administering needed reproof or counsel so that one may get healed. End quote. Let that sit in the air for a minute. It's a not so low-key dig on the person, the individual. The governing body says there in that paragraph, you need a new personality. It's a you problem. After all, you have the truth and you have Holy Spirit. Sorry you have debilitating, crippling anxiety, but you don't need a mental health doctor. You just need us. And you need a mature Christian who cares about you. Oh, and if you caught it in the reference, that mature Christian won't be afraid to hit you, the person suffering with who knows what, with some much needed counsel and reproof. They're going to discipline you. Depression and anxiety be gone. You've got an old friend in the congregation who's going to tell it to you like it is and adjust your personality. That's where the problem is. This is the history of the leadership of Jehovah's Witnesses on something as complex and painful as mental health. But such wise counsel wasn't just reserved for a precious Jehovah's Witness, as if telling them to not see a doctor wasn't bad enough. How about some wise words from the faithful slave on what losers mental health doctors were? Did you catch it? If you're thinking, wait a minute, I see that they said psychiatrists are losers and they're involved with the demons and all this stuff, but I'm adding to my mental anguish is the fact that that same loser, I might knock on his door this weekend and offer him a Bible study. Would I still call him a loser when I get to the door? Would I tell him he's playing with the demons and hypnosis? Would I tell him he's as dumb as a monkey? Well, that's a great question. One a thinking person would ask. Insulting the profession of people who spend their lives trying to help other people. But none of that, none of the reasoning, none of the thoughts that might come into your head, it doesn't stop them from saying this. In the August 22nd, 1975 Awake, page 25, just a reminder, all during these decades, we are told Jesus is running the show. Yeah. The quote says, quote, "Is the turning of people from the clergy to the psychiatrists a healthy phenomenon? No, for it really is a case of jumping from the frying pan into the fire. They are worse off than they were before. That they are not the ones to go to help, for one is to when one is depressed and beset with all manner of problems is to be seen from the fact that suicides among them are twice as frequent as among the population in general." End quote, August 2275 Awake, page 25. Wait, what? Did you hear that correctly? Don't go to these doctors, these psychiatrists. You'll be worse than you were before. And hey, look, as proof, the psychiatrists and the doctors, well, if you haven't noticed, they're taking their own lives twice as much as the rest of us. Don't be stupid. They can't offer you any help or comfort. The faithful and discreet slave. It wasn't lost on me that this particular reference was printed in the Awake of August 1975. Not a coincidence for me when I thought about it, when thousands of Jehovah's Witnesses were likely feeling the unrelenting anxiety, stress, and pain that the world was about to end. Would they make it? They didn't know. Or maybe even why was it still here? Causing a cesspool of mental pain. Despite the same guys giving this advice on psychiatrists, telling them that they would be entering paradise in 1975. I mean, gosh, I wonder why Jehovah's Witnesses were even considering a mental health professional in the ripe year of 1975. What could it be? Anyone want to guess? Didn't matter. Don't do it. They're stupid. They're monkeys. By the way, according to this reference, it's the worst place you can go. They're also taking their own lives more often than everybody else. It's unbelievable. Again, Jesus is running the show. And I hate sharing what I'm about to share. But fast forward for a moment in my own journey to being an elder. I can tell you there were two things most elders never wanted to deal with: marital problems and someone dealing with mental illness. Those were the two things. Nobody wanted to do it. Nobody wanted to get involved. I've never seen elders look faster into their lap or their book bag than someone saying, we have a friend, they need shepherding, here's a situation. Everybody looking down, I want nothing to do with this. And I wince when I remember comments made in elders meetings, including this one. And I'm not kidding, you can tell it's burned on my psyche. Quote, "Oh yeah, she was so depressed and lonely, she pulled her pants down for that guy." End quote. So there, I shared one. Not proud of that. Real. And I'm not here saying that all elders say or feel that way, despite what the counsel is to go seek them. But there are some, no question, that want nothing to do with this. And mental illness and all that entails continued to grow throughout the 1980s and the 1990s, and it was becoming very apparent that elders were not equipped to deal with it. In many cases, it was the result of unchecked illness from decades gone by, from childhood, from unspeakable things that happened to them way before they were witnesses or when they were a child Jehovah's Witness. Elders were not equipped to deal with it. There is an oft-quoted study by Havor Montag where he monitored the admissions to state and private mental hospitals and local mental health clinics in the state of Ohio in the U.S. from 1972 to 1976, about 4 years. From this study of 102 cases, he estimated, quote, the mental illness of Jehovah's Witnesses is approximately 10 to 16 times higher than the rate for the general non-witness population. From his intensive interviews with witness patients and others, Montag concluded that persons who had emotional problems were attracted to the witnesses, but involvement also caused many of the emotional problems that they suffered. This is evident from the fact that many with problems reported they were far happier after they left. End quote. Wow. Small sampling in the 70s. In other words, in the time since and in the 2025 era, the problem grew and continues to grow. In fact, those who might be suffering from some sort of mental issue or anguish, as you'll note from that study, a small snapshot, they actually were attracted to Jehovah's Witnesses. And I'm guessing that most of it centered, I don't know, it might be a reach, around a hope for relief on a make-believe paradise earth with animals and stuff, with friends and family, in perfect mental health. When it never shows up, and it hasn't, people suffer even more. But with the surge in mental health problems, Jehovah's Witness elders weren't able to handle any of this. I lived it. And you will notice that they started to soften their stance on seeking professional help. That's not an accident. Not an accident at all. Suddenly, doctors, who we were just told a couple of years earlier were sicker than the rest of us and were dumb and you should never go to one, and that they couldn't be fooled by monkeys anymore, well, doctors now suddenly were spoken of in this light. In the Watchtower of 1988, October 15th, page 29, we're told, quote, "What, though, about accepting treatment from a psychiatrist or a psychologist? This would be a personal decision to be made with due caution. Of even more concern, I want to say that again, someone is mentally sick, in pain, excruciating darkness. They say, quote, Of even more concern, there's more concern than baffles me. Of even more concern is the fact that some well-intentioned practitioners have given advice that flatly contradicts the Bible. Does the physician understand and respect the beliefs of Jehovah's Witnesses? End quote. We've seen an evolution here in a couple of short decades. From never go to doctors, they get involved with demonism, hypnosis, and monkeys, to, well, it's a personal decision, but of even more concern, do they respect our organization? Suddenly, it was all a personal decision. But make no mistake, anything they told us in our darkest moments must support, according to them, the governing body, the faithful slave, the Bible, and the organization, not your mental health. It's of more concern. You might be suffering from any sort of painful thought, emotion, memory, trauma, but if something gave you relief, it better match the book that also features talking snakes, talking donkeys, invisible angels, burning bushes, and God-endorsed slavery. Same book. Make no mistake, the human brain, any one of ours, struggles with all of this. You just want to feel better. And if your psychiatrist or psychologist tells you that looking at images and illustrations of tiny little girls and their puppies being sucked into the ground in earthquakes, or dead bodies piled up laying on top of each other, or people running in the streets from fireballs flying on and on I could go, well, the psychiatrist says that isn't good for your mental well-being. Well, then, I've got news for a Jehovah's Witness who's bravely listening. That means it doesn't agree with the Bible or the governing body. And you will be marked as such, whispered about and avoided by the shepherds who have completely run out of answers on how to help you. So as the organization started to grow and mental health issues were increasing among Jehovah's Witnesses, suddenly, and I'm telling you, it's by design, the organization started to soften its stance on professional help yet again. Yes, if your brain says, wow, Jesus was sure harsh in his messages just decades earlier, but suddenly he's come around to the idea of me seeing a doctor, you should think that. Here's an example. The Awake of October 8th, 1991, page 9 says, quote, some who are extremely distressed may decide to seek the help of a qualified physician, counselor, or mental health professional. End quote. Wow. And while they stop short of endorsing or even encouraging a Jehovah's Witness to see a doctor that desperately needs one, they say we might decide to do it. You might decide to. It's up to you. Would you look at that? Out of nowhere, Jesus Christ, the king of this organization, must have remembered, I don't know, what he said so many years earlier in the same book this all has to agree with. At Mark 2:17 of the New World Translation, and again this quote was from the Awake of 1991, took Jesus some time to remember this. Jesus said this, quote, on hearing this, Jesus said to them, those who are strong do not need a physician, but those who are ill do. End quote. Yeah. This wise counsel was in the Bible all along. Sick people need a doctor. But he discouraged those sick mentally or emotionally from seeing one until, well, as you can see from their literature, the late 80s, early 90s, when he remembered he said this way back on his trip to Earth. That Jesus forgets things at times. What are the chances that the governing body, gosh, they also forgot this? And they did, because it's in the Bible. It's wild, isn't it? Or is it? But even though they suddenly remembered this after decades of allowing precious people to suffer from mental anguish because they were obedient, they still put first things first. And a trigger warning here for anyone suffering right now, mentally or emotionally, this wasn't printed for you to see. This is printed just for the elders to see. But it's very telling as to what is important to the governing body and this organization. From the Letters to Elders, March 23rd, 1992, the elders were told this, quote, "There are times when an emotionally distressed Christian may seek professional help. Whether or not a brother or a sister pursues treatment from psychiatrists, psychologists, or therapists is a personal decision as long as the therapy does not conflict with Bible principles. Potential problems may be avoided if a patient or a companion explains to the therapist the importance of the sufferer's religious beliefs. Some medical professionals and therapists offer group therapy to those suffering from the effects of child abuse. While participating in group therapy by a professional therapist is a personal decision, there could be problems of revealing confidential facts about other members of the Christian congregation during such therapy if a Christian does not exercise discretion." End quote. Anything said in a person's most vulnerable moments, in any pain you've endured, must not cross the line and hurt the organization, okay? You can see that doctor, but don't you dare let them give you advice that contradicts the Bible. In fact, you're there to get help, but they even suggest to elders that someone bring a friend who apparently isn't sick to explain to the doctor how much Jehovah's Witnesses mean to that person and mean to you. It's all very loving indeed. What it actually is sick. I continue to be amazed that all of this stuff is available for Jehovah's Witnesses to read. You can go read these references. They're right there. They're on their website. But there it is. For years, when someone was suffering with a debilitating mental health crisis, they were told to go to the congregation elders. Just don't say too much if you go to a therapist. Don't make us look bad. And I might add that counsel remains today. The complexity of mental health issues. You might now approach an elder, and as we just learned, that elder is qualified to give you advice, and he might only be 21 years old or even younger if he's already appointed. He's qualified to give you advice for this stuff. And I don't need to emphasize how serious mental health is and how many relieve themselves of this pain in a tragic way. I'm not going to say it here. But it is life and death serious for someone suffering. And the advice is to go to the elders? The elders that just read that letter? Yeah, that's the counsel. And the counsel has not changed. From the August 15th, 1993 Watchtower, page 26, we're told, quote, "Spiritually mature elders in the Christian congregation can be a great source of help. Few of them would claim to be skilled in the medical or mental health fields, but they do know and trust God's word and principles. They can prove to be like a hiding place from the wind and a place of concealment from the rainstorms, like streams of water in a waterless country, like a shadow of a heavy crag in an exhausted land." Isaiah 32:2, "take full advantage of their help." End quote. No word on if it's the elder that harmed you or it's the elders that are causing you mental anguish. You should still go to them. They're not pros, but they are, quote, "a great source of help." Jehovah's Witnesses are told that during a very serious crisis, they should go to a group of men whose only qualifications to help you consists of being over 21 years old, and hopefully they're getting about 10 hours out in field service, knocking on doors and sliding tracks under doormats and into screen doors. Or maybe he's a good speaker on the stage, or he might just be a nice guy. But when that reference says, quote, few of them would claim to be skilled in the mental health field, let me help them. And you. None of them, not a single one, are skilled in matters of mental health. None. Zero. Whipping out the Bible to speak to a severely depressed or anxious person does very little to help them. Reading a story of how depressed King David was, so he pulled out his harp and he sang the Psalms. Aren't they beautiful? It ain't going to cut it. Showing a modern person that Elijah got so depressed, he asked Jehovah to take him. So Jehovah personally sent him an angel to talk to him, hug it out. Well, it doesn't work for someone in 2025. Don't wait for an angel. And this is literally all a Jehovah's Witness elder has to draw on when speaking to someone suffering with a major mental crisis. Calling it irresponsible isn't strong enough. The idea that a bunch of guys with their own problems who can quote an ancient book written by mostly sheep herders can help someone with mental health crisis in 2025 is absurd. It is absurd and it is dangerous. But for many years, the answer wasn't don't go to a doctor. The Bible and the elders, this organization has been highly irresponsible with precious lives. And they go out of their way, even today, with today's article I mentioned on the front page, to show that the organization, is the answer. Consider yet another printed experience. Bear with me for a moment. From the September 1st, 1990 Watchtower, page 15, Jehovah's Witnesses, even those suffering with mental health, were treated to this story. Quote, the sister then told her how a knowledge of the Bible had helped her. She had lost an 18-year-old daughter in death and had gone into a state of deep depression for 8 years. Neither psychiatrists nor costly medications helped her to overcome this depression. Several times she said she was hospitalized, but no improvement resulted. Her household was taken care of by servants because she herself was not able to take care of anything. End quote for a moment. We recognize depression, clearly. The story continues, quote, she tried to commit suicide because she had lost interest in life. Nothing seemed to help. Then she told the lady one day, here it comes, folks, Jehovah's Witnesses called and left her some Bible literature. That sparked her interest in God's Word, and she began to read the Bible all the way through. Something started to change within her. She began to get up in the morning and take an interest in her household. She finally decided to take care of the house by herself and found she was able to do so. It was as though she had never been sick. This made her feel very happy. She did not return to the psychiatrist. Her will to live was stimulated by her knowledge of God's Word, and this proved to be the best medicine. She looked for Jehovah's Witnesses, and they started a regular study with her. She also began to attend meetings, and very soon she got baptized. No longer bothered with depression, she now finds joy in serving Jehovah. End quote. We've heard this stuff before without coming out and saying it. Even in 1990, even after saying it's a personal decision, they're still discouraging mental health professionals. All you really need is a book written and available today mostly written for the governing body and featuring all sorts of amazing things that some would even arguably say features people that may have been suffering from mental health disorders themselves. All the visions. What was John eating when he saw the revelation? Some mushrooms, or was he okay? Who knows? But if this last thing was a true story, I couldn't be happier, and I mean this, sincerity, that reading the Bible and associating with Jehovah's Witnesses helped this woman find peace and health. Couldn't be happier if that's true. But I'm going to come out and say it, I don't believe it. Going to the Kingdom Hall weekly, where she is taught a lie about a paradise earth, is comparable to taking a drug so you can avoid the reality of the moment. People distract themselves with things all the time when suffering. But this is the crap this organization has been rolling out to people. The truth is, stories such as this were put to print to keep real people that were reading them from seeking the help they might desperately need. Forcing them to read the Bible more or getting to the Kingdom Hall, all in the name of the organization, it doesn't help people. But you see that they push the agenda. She dumped her psychiatrist because she didn't need him anymore. Oh, and the message to the reader, neither do you. Just be a Jehovah's Witness. Get baptized, serve Jehovah. And I'm here to bluntly state, based on what's on the website today to the world, this is grossly irresponsible. And frankly, I'm going to say it, I believe it's evil. Especially when a precious person is suffering. They are desperate, they're vulnerable, they're unwell. Reading the Bible's not going to help that. A Jehovah's Witness listening may be thinking, well, come on now, this guy's being a little rough on the organization. They've changed all that now. He's read some older references. Old light, we know the old light, new light story. They tell us we can see a doctor now. It's up to us. And anyone saying that, yeah, you're right. You're absolutely correct. With the increase in serious illness, the organization, and of course, got to say it yet again, and it's not sarcasm, we're told Jesus runs the show, suddenly began to almost encourage seeking professional help. In the December 2014 Awake, pages 4 and 6, we are told this, quote, mental health professionals can treat many mental health disorders successfully. The first crucial step, then, is to obtain a thorough assessment from a competent health professional who is experienced in treating mental conditions. Many people have learned to deal with mental disorders after acquiring a better understanding of their condition and following the treatment prescribed by mental health professionals. Follow the treatment prescribed by qualified mental health professionals. End quote. We have come a long way in this organization. And I'm very grateful that they now put this type of thing to print. If the organization saves one life by printing such advice, I'm grateful, and I'm sure all of you are as well. But it does not explain the long history of dangerous and insulting counsel. Since the year 2000, articles have begun to appear admitting professional treatment may be beneficial and that it's a personal decision. Make no mistake, they were overwhelmed, and there are legal implications. Underline that 40 times. And by the way, thanks for your permission. And if you thought giving men permission to grow hair on certain parts of their body was bad, wow. I'm going to go out on a limb and say this trumps it. Giving people permission to seek the help of a mental health professional. But just when you think the governing body and faithful and discreet slave, I can't even put that into words, just when you think they've come full circle on mental health, I'm here to tell you, I'm sorry, think again. The governing body still shies away from promoting or endorsing the benefits of professional help. For example, and by the way, this is all very subtle, the 2021 January Watchtower in Study Article 1 recommends controlling anxiety through prayer, Bible study, and association with other members. The exact same counsel they were giving back in the 1940s. Jesus runs the show. He said, maybe you should go see a doctor. He here says, no, prayer, Bible study, and hanging out with other witnesses is still better, kind of reverting to what he said decades ago. And if you look this article up, notice the footnote on page 3, which says, quote, some faithful brothers and sisters suffer from an overwhelming feeling of anxiety or panic. Such a disorder is a serious health condition and should not be confused with the type of anxiety that Jesus was discussing. End quote. First, I don't get the impression Jesus was trying to share an exhaustive list of mental illnesses in the Bible. He put it all under one heading. Whenever he did comment on it, he called it anxiety. Anxiety. So here they are again. Just when you think they've evolved and they're doing the right thing, they continue to roll out counsel. And I don't even want to get into the different types of anxiety. It doesn't matter. It hurts. It hurts. They still say, hang out with us and read the Bible more. And did you notice from what I read there from the 2021 January Watchtower in the paragraph as well as the footnote that once again, professional help is nowhere to be found, nor recommended or even mentioned, despite being crucial for people undergoing overwhelming anxiety and panic disorders. It's nothing new. They're still doing it. They're still doing it as late as 2021. And one more reference, because it's just so unbelievable to prove this point. From the May 1st Watchtower 1977, pages 259 and 260, we are told, quote, what can you do, especially if you find no medical basis for your depressed condition? While psychiatry may be able to help in some cases, the very best and the really lasting help can be obtained from the Bible and from the Christian congregation. Why? Because God created the human body and mind, and He knows the human makeup. God's counsel is, therefore, the best mental therapy. The foremost need for the depressed one, then, is prayer to Jehovah God. End quote. Dear friends and listeners, this couldn't be more horrifyingly wrong and more dangerous. You can't pray away depression and anxiety. And reading a book that features talking animals, burning bushes, a God who has his own personality disorders, everything from jealousy and murderous rampage to, hey, I love you so much I sent my son, all the confusion comes with it, is not going to help anyone with mental illness. And as I've shared, even they know that's true. They do, but they still push their agenda every chance they get. And that agenda is just read the Bible, just pray more, and of course, hang out with us. Problem solved. No, it isn't. The problem is never solved in Jehovah's Witnesses. And I'm being blunt as could be here. So please, if you're a Jehovah's Witness bravely listening, never, ever consider trying to pray away serious, painful anxiety, panic, depression, schizophrenia, any of these things, thinking Jehovah is enough to keep you safe. Please talk to someone. Set up an appointment. Relying on God is a personal choice, and I'm not saying there's not benefits, to certain principles, but it is not going to solve a mental health problem. In the end, there are two very critical things for a Jehovah's Witness to consider on the subject of mental health. One, I'm going to say it again. Please seek help. I've done it. Therapy is a great thing. Really helpful. Really has helped. there are things you can do practically to get help for some things. It's okay. It will help you so much. Whatever you do, do not look at the counsel, even the more non-committal counsel in recent times from the governing body. It could even confuse you. It's okay to go, we'd rather you didn't, just read the Bible more. It's nothing more than a bunch of guys giving an incredibly ignorant and dangerous set of human opinions. And then the second thing is this for a Jehovah's Witness. Is it reasonable in your mind, no matter what you might be dealing with right now, to conclude that Jesus Christ of the Bible has changed his thoughts, his direction, his advice, his treatments on mental health, and he's changed what he said to us as people multiple times, going back and forth, calling people names, insulting others? Is it reasonable to think that Jesus is the one behind this for nearly a century? If your answer is, well, no, Stacy, it's been new light and the governing body has had to adjust, well, then a final question. Why would Jesus entrust the mental health of all of humanity into the hands of other male humans that didn't create man, nor have a single hour of education on the complexities of the human brain, our hormones, our anatomy, or anything else? Why would he give it to them? I'll allow you to come to your own conclusion. As of today, all of mankind is to believe 11 men in upstate New York are the best source of help for mental illness. They will hand you a book they say was written mostly for them, and they will tell you the only therapist you need is invisible, somewhere in outer space, and his only therapy is found in the same book they just handed you. Mental health is a very serious question, how we handle it. And the history of Jehovah's Witnesses is littered with dangerous, deadly, irresponsible commentary on something they know nothing about. They should sit this one out. I want to thank you for joining me this week. Anybody who might be going through this, please, please consider these things. Truly, huge hugs, whatever it takes. And until next time, be well.